Hey, happy Friday. It is Ask Rachel Anything time, and this week's question is basically about the future of the apparel industry. Someone was asking me the other day on a call what I felt like was going to be happening in the apparel industry for the next year or so. Actually, they're kind of figuring out whether or not it was the right thing to jump ship from corporate and start kind of their own freelancing opportunity. And to be honest, unfortunately, right now, I think we are in for a really tough year and a half ahead. And I think the next 6 months, based on the conversations that I've been having with other small business owners, other entrepreneurs, other like mastermind groups, the next 6 months could be really, really rocky. And I hate to deliver that bad news, but the economy right now and the way that things are shaping up and the way that things are looking, the engagement that we are basically not seeing on social media and in a lot of our outreach is indicating to a lot of us that that things are just going to continue being a little bit tough. Now, 2023 was already a really tough year, I think, for a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs. I've unfortunately seen so many brands close their doors and not be able to survive through it because they weren't able to pivot, or they kind of ended up falling prey to the supply chain issues that we had during the pandemic. And there was like a total whiplash effect that kind of happened on the back end of that. And so these next 6 months, I think, are going to be pretty tough. If you can figure out how to pivot your brand a little bit, like, is there some other service or offering that you can put out into the world that is going to help you survive for the next 6 months? It might not be thriving, but it could absolutely just be surviving, so that as we get into the next year, the next 15 months, the next 18 months, you're poising yourself for the slingshot effect that we expect after all of this turmoil kind of comes to an end. Now, everything will turn itself around. It always does. This is how the economy has always traditionally worked. This is how consulting and freelancing has also worked. I've been part of the corporate industries where, we lose headcount and we lay people off, which is happening really heavily still right now. Like, we're seeing Nike go through multiple rounds of layoffs this year, and they've just announced that. Like, I think they just finished iteration 2 of 5, I think, that they're going to be doing. I don't know all the details of it, so if that's incorrect, please put a comment below and correct me and let me know what's actually going on. But layoffs and all of that are still happening. People are still losing their jobs, and because of that, a lot of these companies are really holding tight onto their budgets, and so headcount won't be open for a little while, and consulting dollars are included in that, and freelance dollars are included in that. So what we typically see happen next is full-time headcount opens back up. And so depending on what sector of the industry you're in, you could still kind of be in this layoff section where people are still losing jobs, unfortunately. We are starting to see a little bit of a shift in more of like the fashion area, so not so much outdoor. Outdoor, I think, is still really struggling. But more in the fashion sector, some more jobs are starting to open up. I'm starting to see more job openings listed on LinkedIn. If you're like following on Indeed or any of those kinds of websites, you will probably start to see more listings happen. And so that is a good indicator that brands are at least starting to look at opening up their budgets for headcount and opening up their dollars. But we are also seeing a really big push for everyone to be back in the office. So where we all kind of learned how to work remotely, work from home, kind of do our thing, have a little bit better work-life balance throughout the pandemic. A lot of the companies that are out there hiring right now are pushing really, really hard. Like, the pendulum has totally swung in the opposite direction to everybody must be in the office together. And we are actually noticing at Unmarked Street that we're getting a lot better productivity out of allowing people to continue being remote. There is something about the efficiency of meetings and fittings that is required when you're not all in the room together. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of camaraderie and there's a lot of team building that happens when you're all in the room together that I love. Like I miss that. That's something that I love about being in the corporate career. But there is something that's happening by staying remote and by staying virtual that's pushing us to actually have better processes, to be a little bit more dialed. We have to be a little bit more organized to be able to hold remote meetings in the way that we have been. And so if you're like missing launch dates and you're not launching on time because of what we call in the project management world, we call it meeting creep. These meetings that are supposed to only be like 30 minutes long end up being an hour, 90 minutes, or you don't actually even finish all the things that you're supposed to talk about in the meeting. So you have to have another meeting and you have to have a recap about the meeting. Like that tends to happen when you are all in the office together. It happens less, at least from what we've observed, when you are remote and you have kind of an agenda and you have to be prepared to come to these remote meetings. So I don't know, that I think there's just an interesting dynamic of what's happening right now in the industry, that the pendulum is swinging back that way. What we tend to see after headcount opens, like full-time headcount opens, is that if you are then trying to get into like freelance work or trying to be a contractor, like our contracting agency will then expect kind of the pendulum to start coming back, where brands will want to kind of bring in experts to do key things. And so that's where we're kind of expecting the industry to go over the next 6 months, year, 18 months. And my best recommendation and what we're doing here at Unmarked Street is to just figure out how to survive the interim, because we know better days are ahead. We know that they will come, but in the meantime, how do we continue surviving, and how do we continue figuring out how to make ends meet and growing just small incremental ways over the next 6 months to 18 months to make sure that we survive to get to that point where we feel like the industry will be back in a better place. So if that was disappointing news to you, I'm really sorry, but I do think that the industry is going to continue to be in a little bit of a tough spot for the next little while. And so I encourage you to try to stay positive about it, know that better days will come ahead, and that is what we're doing here at Unmarked Street. And we will try to be better about coming back on Fridays for Ask Rachel Anything. If you have any questions for me, let me know. I would be honored to answer them here. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend ahead, and I'll talk to you next week. Later.